Echoes of authenticity. Juniper. Evans never intended to cause a scene at the Metropolitan Museum Gala. As the founder of Gateway Youth, a struggling community arts program in Queens, she was simply there to accept a modest grant and politely thank the donors. Instead, when handed the microphone for what was supposed to be brief remarks, something inside her snapped. "While I appreciate this donation," she said, her voice stronger than she intended, "I find it ironic that we're celebrating philanthropy in a room where a single centerpiece costs more than our monthly operating budget. The children in my program won't ever set foot in this museum without our help, and they certainly won't be invited to galas like this one." A hush fell over the crowd of New York's elite. Juniper felt a momentary pang of regret. This wasn't how fundraising worked, but she continued anyway, describing the teenagers who found safety in her program, their brilliant talents, and the systematic barriers they faced. When she finished, the applause was scattered and uncomfortable. Juniper expected to be quietly ushered out. What she didn't expect was Reed Harrington. Reed had built Nexus Technologies from his dormitory room into a global empire. At 36, his reputation was as impressive as it was intimidating. Brilliant but ruthless, innovative but detached. He'd attended the gala only because his PR team insisted, and he'd planned to leave early until Juniper spoke. Later that evening, as Juniper waited for her rideshare outside, a sleek black car pulled alongside her, the window lowered to reveal Reed's angular face. "Your speech was unexpected," he said. Juniper squared her shoulders. "Sorry if I ruined the evening's polite fiction. Actually, I found it refreshing." A rare smile crossed his face. "Everyone in that room talks about impact while writing checks to ease their conscience. You actually create it. Is that why you're here? To compliment my disruption of your event?" "My event?" Reed laughed. "I avoid these things whenever possible. I'm here because I want to see your program in action." Juniper studied him skeptically. His tailored suit probably cost more than her annual rent. "Why?" "Contrary to what you might think, Ms. Evans, I didn't always have wealth. I grew up in foster care in Detroit. Programs like yours were rare, but the few that existed changed my life." Something in his tone rang true, despite her instinct to dismiss him. "We're not a tourist attraction for the wealthy to gawk at. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering partnership. My foundation has resources your program needs, and you clearly have insights my foundation lacks." Rain began to fall, and Juniper's rideshare notification showed another 10-minute delay. "Let me drive you home," Reed offered. "No strings attached. We can discuss what a real collaboration might look like." Juniper hesitated. Everything about Reed Harrington represented the world she criticized: excessive wealth, power, privilege. Yet something in his direct gaze suggested authenticity rarely found in his circles. "Fine," she said, climbing into his car. "But if this is some publicity stunt to rehabilitate your image after that antitrust investigation last year, I'm not interested." Reed's eyebrows rose slightly. "You certainly do your research. I like to know who I'm dealing with." "Fair enough." He extended his hand. Reed Harrington, former foster kid, current tech entrepreneur interested in genuine impact rather than tax write-offs. Despite herself, Juniper smiled and shook his hand. Juniper Evans, former teaching artist, current nonprofit director, perpetually suspicious of billionaires bearing gifts. As the car pulled away from the curb, neither realized this rain-soaked conversation would change both their worlds irrevocably. Parallel paths, the headquarters of Gateway Youth, occupied a renovated warehouse in Queens, its walls covered in vibrant murals created by program participants. When Reed Harrington arrived unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon, Juniper was elbow-deep in paint, helping a group of teenagers complete a commissioned mural for a local restaurant. "Mr. Harrington," she said, wiping her hands on her already paint-splattered apron. "I didn't expect you to actually show up." Reed, looking oddly out of place in his casual attempt at inconspicuous clothing, designer jeans and a simple button-down that still somehow screamed wealth, glanced around with genuine curiosity. "I always follow through on my interests," he replied, rolling up his sleeves. "And please, call me Reed." To Juniper's surprise, He stayed for 3 hours, awkwardly at first, but with increasing comfort as the teens pulled him into their project. His analytical mind approached art differently, precisely, methodically, but by the end, he was laughing alongside 17-year-old Darius, who had dubbed him Mr. Algorithm. This unexpected visit became a pattern over the following weeks. Reed would appear, sometimes with practical donations like new lighting or art supplies, sometimes with nothing but his time. He never brought photographers or PR teams. Gradually, Juniper's wariness began to thaw. One evening, as they sat on the rooftop of the building sharing takeout after the students had left, Reed asked, "Why art? Of all the ways to help these kids, why focus on creativity?" Juniper considered the question. "Because it's the one thing that can't be taken from them," she finally answered. "Education systems fail them, housing is unstable. Families sometimes disappoint. But once they know they can create something meaningful, that they have a voice, it changes everything. Like it changed you," Reed observed quietly. Juniper looked at him sharply. "You've been researching me." "Professional habit," he admitted without apology. "Your mother was an artist. She died when you were 14. You spent 3 years in foster care before aging out of the system. Is that supposed to impress me? That you can access my personal history?" "No," Reed said. "What impresses me is that you transformed that pain into purpose. Most people don't." He hesitated, then added, "I didn't for a long time. I channeled mine into accumulation, money, achievements, power." "And now?" Juniper asked, suddenly curious about the man beneath the billionaire facade. Reed gazed out at the Queen's skyline, the Manhattan towers glittering in the distance. "Now I'm wondering if I've been measuring success by the wrong metrics." Their conversations deepened over the following months. Reed began inviting Juniper to consult on his foundation's initiatives. She brought him to community meetings where residents initially eyed him with suspicion until they realized he was actually listening to their concerns. Despite their growing connection, Juniper maintained boundaries. She refused his offers to fund Gateway Youth entirely. "We need sustainable community support, not a single patron." Declined invitations to high-profile events. "That's your world, not mine." And kept their relationship professional despite the undeniable attraction simmering between them. Then came the gallery opening that changed everything. Reed had quietly arranged for a prestigious Chelsea gallery to showcase art from Gateway Youth participants. The exhibition drew critics, collectors, and media attention. Several pieces sold for substantial amounts, with proceeds going directly to the young artists and the program. As Juniper watched 16-year-old Zoe explaining her installation to an enraptured audience, she felt a hand brush against hers. "Thank you," she whispered to Reed, emotion tightening her throat. "This opportunity means everything to them." "You did this," he said. "I just provided the venue." Later that night, after the successful opening, they walked along the High Line in comfortable silence. When Reed's fingers interlaced with hers, Juniper didn't pull away. "This complicates things," she said softly. Reed stopped walking and turned to face her. "Life is complicated," he replied. "But this, what's happening between us, feels like the simplest truth I've known in years." When he kissed her, the city lights blurred around them. Despite all her rational arguments against it, despite the worlds that separated them, Juniper knew she was falling for the man who had appeared in her life so unexpectedly. What she couldn't know was how their different realities would eventually collide, testing both their love and their most deeply held values. Crossroads of values over the next year, Juniper and Reed navigated the complexities of their relationship with surprising grace. They built a connection that bridged their different worlds while respecting the independence that defined them both. Reed introduced technology initiatives to Gateway Youth, bringing coding workshops alongside the arts programming. Juniper helped Reed's foundation restructure its approach to community investment, emphasizing long-term partnership over paternalistic charity. Together, they were creating something neither could have accomplished alone. Their personal relationship deepened as well. Reed discovered a playfulness he'd forgotten he possessed. while Juniper found herself expanding her vision of what was possible. They disagreed frequently and passionately, but always with respect. Then Reed's company launched a controversial facial recognition platform. Despite its stated purpose for security applications, privacy advocates raised alarms about potential misuse, particularly in marginalized communities, the very communities Juniper served. "How could you not discuss this with me?" Juniper demanded one evening in Reed's penthouse apartment. "This is business, not personal," Reed responded, his voice measured in the way it always became when he retreated behind corporate reasoning. "The technology itself is neutral. It's the implementation that matters. Nothing about technology is neutral," Juniper argued. "The values of its creators are embedded in every algorithm. You know this." The argument ended in an uneasy truce, but something had shifted. Juniper noticed Reed pulling away, spending more time at work, making decisions without considering their shared values. Meanwhile, media coverage of their relationship intensified, portraying them as a modern fairy tale, the billionaire and the community activist finding unlikely love. Reed seemed increasingly comfortable in this narrative. Juniper felt increasingly uncomfortable. 3 weeks later, Reed invited Juniper to Paris. "A quick getaway," he explained. "We could both use a break." Paris in spring was every bit as magical as clichés suggested. They wandered through museums, discovered hidden cafes, and for brief moments, forgot the tension growing between them. On their third evening, Reed arranged a private dinner at the Jules Verne restaurant in the Eiffel Tower, the entire level reserved just for them. As the sunset painted the city gold, Reed took her hand across the table. "When I met you, Juniper Evans, I was successful by every conventional measure and utterly lost by every meaningful one." Juniper felt her heart accelerate, recognizing the moment unfolding before her. "You challenged every assumption I'd built my life around," Reed continued. "You showed me that real impact isn't measured in market share or stock prices, but in lives transformed." He reached into his pocket and produced a velvet box. Inside was a ring featuring an ethically sourced diamond of staggering proportions. "You changed my life," he said. "Will you marry me?" Before Juniper could respond, she noticed movement. Photographers on the level below, telephoto lenses aimed at their table. A small drone hovered discreetly outside the window, capturing the perfect angle of the billionaire on one knee, the glittering Parisian backdrop framing the scene. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Reed glanced toward the photographers, seemingly unsurprised. "A moment worth documenting." "You planned this," Juniper realized. "The press, the spectacle. I wanted to give you everything," Reed explained, confusion crossing his features as he registered her reaction. "This is a moment people dream about." "Other people, maybe," Juniper said, standing up. "Not me. You know me better than this, Reed, or I thought you did." "Juniper, wait." "This isn't about the proposal," she said, tears threatening. "It's about everything this represents. You're slipping back into your world of image and acquisition. I'm becoming another achievement to showcase." "That's not fair," Reed protested, real hurt in his eyes. "Maybe not," Juniper acknowledged, "but neither is pretending we've resolved the fundamental differences between us. I love you, Reed, but I won't become an ornament in your curated life, and I won't compromise the values that brought us together in the first place." She placed the ring box gently on the table. "When you figure out what truly matters to you, beyond the grand gestures and public perception, you know where to find me." As Juniper walked away, leaving Reed standing alone against the Parisian skyline, both felt the weight of what was breaking and what, perhaps, still remained to be built. If only they could find their way back to the truth that had initially drawn them together. Solitary reflections. The tabloids had a field day. Tech titan rejected billionaire's proposal disaster. Reed's PR team scrambled to control the narrative, but Reed himself retreated from public view. He canceled meetings, postponed product launches, and disappeared to his secluded property in the Cascade Mountains, ignoring concerned calls from his executive team. Alone in the modernist glass house overlooking ancient forests, Reed confronted the hollow feeling that had haunted him long before Juniper walked away. Success had always been his shield against vulnerability, wealth his barrier against the uncertainty he'd known as a child. Now, surrounded by the trappings of his achievement, he felt more adrift than ever. On the third day of his self-imposed isolation, Reed hiked to a ridge overlooking the valley. The vastness of the landscape offered perspective his penthouse views never could. Here his wealth meant nothing. The forest didn't care about his stock portfolio or his industry disruptions. What do I actually want? He asked the empty air, the question echoing against the mountainside. Back at Gateway Youth, Juniper threw herself into work, expanding programming despite the emotional exhaustion that dogged her steps. When well-meaning colleagues asked about Reed, she changed the subject. When donors mentioned his absence, she emphasized the program's self-sufficiency. Only at night, alone in her apartment, did she allow herself to wonder if she'd been too harsh, too quick to judge. 3 weeks after Paris, a letter arrived, not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter on thick cream paper. "I understand now," Reed had written. "The proposal wasn't about us. It was about me proving something to the world. You deserved better. You always have." He didn't ask for forgiveness or suggest reconciliation. Instead, he simply shared his truth, closing with, "Whatever happens between us, thank you for seeing me, not the billionaire, not the success story, but the person I've struggled to become." Juniper folded the letter carefully and placed it in her desk drawer, unsure how to respond or whether to respond at all. Meanwhile, Reed began the most significant overhaul of his life and business. He started with Nexus Technologies' controversial facial recognition platform, personally leading a comprehensive ethics review. After consulting with privacy advocates and community representatives, he made the unprecedented decision to restrict its deployment and establish independent oversight of all future applications. The business press called it corporate suicide. Reed called it alignment. He restructured his foundation, implementing Juniper's philosophy of community partnership at scale. He declined high-profile speaking engagements to instead meet with small groups of social entrepreneurs in cities across the country, listening more than talking. Most significantly, Reed initiated conversations with his board about transitioning Nexus Technologies to a public benefit corporation, a move that would legally require the company to consider social impact alongside profit. Several board members threatened to resign. Reed remained resolute. "This isn't about Juniper," he told his concerned COO, Vivian, who had known him since the company's early days. Or not entirely. "It's about building something that matters beyond the next quarter or the next acquisition." "You've always cared about impact," Vivian pointed out. "I've cared about measurable outcomes," Reed corrected. "That's different from caring about people." 4 months after Paris, Reed received an unexpected message from Darius, the Gateway Youth participant, who had nicknamed him Mr. Algorithm. Darius had been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship but was struggling with imposter syndrome about leaving his community. Without informing Juniper, Reed arranged to meet Darius at a coffee shop near Gateway. They talked for hours about belonging, identity, and navigating worlds that weren't designed for you. "You know," Darius said as they were parting, "Juniper's been different since you left. Still amazing, still pushing us all to be our best selves, but I don't know. Something's missing." Reed nodded, careful not to ask the questions burning within him. "Sometimes the hardest thing is finding the balance," Darius continued, suddenly philosophical, "between where you come from and where you're going, between staying true to yourself and growing into something new." Reed looked at the young man with newfound respect. "When did you get so wise?" Darius grinned. "Probably all those philosophy books Juniper keeps pushing on us. That woman thinks art and deep thinking go hand in hand." "She's right," Reed said softly. As they parted ways, Reed realized something fundamental had shifted within him. For the first time in his life, his sense of purpose wasn't tied to achievement or acquisition. The transformation Juniper had catalyzed had taken root in her absence, growing into something authentic and enduring. Whether or not they found their way back to each other, Reed knew he would never return to the man he had been before her, and for that he would be forever grateful. Bridges between worlds autumn, painted. Queens in vibrant hues as Juniper supervised the installation of Gateway Youth's newest project, a community garden designed and built by program participants on what had once been an abandoned lot. The transformation represented everything she believed in: reclaiming forgotten spaces, nurturing growth, creating beauty from neglect. Miss Evans, a city official approached, clipboard in hand. There's been a zoning issue with the garden. Someone from the legal team handling your permits would like to speak with you. Juniper sighed, brushing soil from her hands. Bureaucratic hurdles were a constant challenge in her work. She followed the official to the street where a familiar figure leaned against a modest electric car, not the luxury vehicle she remembered. Reed looked different. Leaner, his features more defined. Casual clothing that actually looked lived in rather than carefully selected for an appearance of casualness. His eyes, though, remained the same, intense, perceptive, now watching her with careful restraint. "You're my legal consultant?" Juniper asked, heart hammering despite her measured tone. "Actually, there's no zoning issue," Reed admitted. "I needed a pretext that wouldn't cause a scene. 6 months of silence, and you resort to deception to talk to me?" "I wrote to you," he pointed out. "One letter isn't a conversation. You didn't respond. I didn't know what to say." Juniper crossed her arms. "Why are you here, Reed?" Instead of answering directly, he gestured to the garden behind her. "This is beautiful work. The integration of art installations with functional growing spaces, it's brilliant." Despite herself, Juniper felt a flutter of pride. The kids designed everything. They researched native plants, food desert mitigation, rainwater collection systems. It's their vision, not mine. "That's always been your gift," Reed said quietly, "helping others find their voice instead of imposing yours." An awkward silence settled between them, heavy with unspoken words and the weight of time past. "I've made changes," Reed finally said. "I've heard," Juniper acknowledged. The business press had covered Reed's company transformation extensively, opinions ranging from visionary pivot to idealistic self-sabotage. "Not for you," Reed clarified. "Or not only for you, for myself, for the legacy I want to build." He hesitated, then added, "I've been volunteering at a youth center in Detroit, teaching coding to kids like I used to be." Juniper's expression softened slightly. "How is that going?" "Humbling," Reed admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "Turns out I have a lot to learn about connecting with 14-year-olds who couldn't care less about my resume." "That sounds familiar," Juniper said, remembering his early awkwardness at Gateway. Reed nodded, then reached into his pocket and handed her a small envelope. "This belongs to you." Inside was a key. "What is this?" she asked. "The deed to this property is being transferred to Gateway Youth," Reed explained, "along with the adjacent 3 lots. The foundation that purchased them is dissolving and distributing all assets to community-led organizations. This garden can expand," Juniper stared at him. "Your foundation?" "Not anymore," Reed said. "I've stepped down from leadership. The board has been restructured to include a majority of representatives from the communities it serves." "Why would you do that?" "Because you were right," Reed said simply. "About everything. About the importance of distributed power rather than centralized control. About the difference between genuine impact and ego-driven philanthropy. About what actually matters." Juniper studied his face, searching for the calculation or performance she had grown to fear, finding instead only open vulnerability. "I'm not here to ask for another chance," Reed continued. "I just wanted you to know that what we built together, the vision we shared, it's continuing whether or not we do." As he turned to leave, Juniper called after him. "Reed," he paused, "would you like to see what the advanced studio has been working on? They've combined digital projection with traditional mural techniques. It's pretty revolutionary." A careful hope kindled in his eyes. "I'd like that very much." As they walked back toward the Gateway building, a careful distance between them, neither rushed to define what might come next. There were still differences to navigate, wounds to heal, trust to rebuild. But something essential had been restored: the recognition of each other's authentic self, the possibility of building something together without sacrificing individual purpose. Later that evening, they sat on the Gateway rooftop, just as they had in the early days, sharing takeout and watching the sunset paint the city skyline. "I don't know if we can find our way back," Juniper admitted. "Maybe we don't go back," Reed suggested. "Maybe we find our way forward instead." He didn't reach for her hand or make grand declarations. Instead, he asked about Gateway's winter programming and shared stories about his students in Detroit. Small moments, honest exchange, the patient work of building connection on solid ground. As night fell over the city, they remained talking, two people from different worlds who had changed each other irrevocably, now discovering what might be possible when love grows from mutual respect rather than romantic fantasy. Not a fairy tale ending, but something far more valuable, an authentic beginning.